Hey guys, Ramsey here. Welcome to another video. Today we have a Vintage Hall of Fame review of one of my all-time favorite fragrances. One of the fragrances I could probably wear for the rest of my life until the grave and be happy every single day of my life wearing this fragrance. It could easily be a signature scent for me. I love this stuff so much. And there's a story why we're reviewing it today. So my father's birthday was this weekend, and his signature scent, if you will, has always been Paco Rabanne Pour Homme. And so I figured, as a guy who he's worn this my entire life. Okay, I'm almost 40 years old, and so he's worn this my whole life. And I thought, what better gift to give him than kind of something new in the fragrance game? Well, not new, but old, vintage. And I thought Jean Martel is the perfumer of Paco Rabanne Pour Homme, and he's also the perfumer of Dior Jules, which is going to be the topic of our video today, okay? And he only made 3 perfumes, and we'll talk about, well, he only made 3 for men. He did do a fragrance or 2 for women, I believe, but he only made 3 for men. And so I made my dad a fat decant of Dior Jules. I said, happy birthday. He actually tried it and loved it. And he said, I've smelled this before on somebody. And I was like, I doubt that. Maybe you have, but probably not. But he said, no, I've smelled this before. And I said, well, it's made by your favorite perfumer who made Paco Rabanne Pour Homme in 1973. So enjoy. You're not going to find anything else like this nowadays. So this urged me to do this review. And, I was looking back on my Dior reviews, and all of my Dior reviews that I've done, individual reviews on, were all from the Privé line. They were all from the higher end Dior's niche collection. So I reviewed Ombre Nuit, Eau Noir, Oud Ispahan, and Spice Blend. Those 4 I've reviewed on the channel. And you can go check out my Christian Dior playlist, but I have not reviewed anything outside of the niche Privé line, if you will. So this is going to be a Vintage Hall of Fame review, but also a first for the channel, a review from a Dior fragrance that is not from the Privé line. And there is a ranked Christian Dior family portrait on the channel. And if you want to see what I think of Jules, go watch that video to see just how high it made it in the ranking. Okay, so there is a little bit of a blurb I'm going to try to read to you here. This is very close to there's some bits and pieces from the original marketing, but here's what it says. Jules, and you're supposed to pronounce it Jules, not Jules, apparently. I know my French is shite normally, but this one's important enough for me to care about. Jules. So Jules is a game. Sorry, let's try this again. Jules is game, smile, fantasy, charm. Jules is gentle yet strong, determined. Jules is always free, always on the run, but manages to do it all. Jules is on the vacation. You can see him everywhere. Jules at work. He isn't obsessed with the boss image. Jules at night. The whole night belongs to him. Jules early in the morning. He dresses up, lights a cigarette, and happily takes off. Masculine and careless. Masculine and careless. These are characteristics of Christian Dior's fragrance. Before it appeared in 1980, Dior started a commercial campaign to prepare men for the new fragrance, proactively named Jules. Jules is a name, yet at the same time it represents the man, the seducer. That's what they called pimps back in the 19th century, interestingly enough. The commercial campaign, the posters were made by the famous Renaud Grauou, caused so much interest that when it finally came out, it sold out on the spot. The perfume is very masculine but elegant, with non-glaring but noticeable amber and notes of leather, flowers, and aromatic herbs. It opens with Artemisia, lavender, cumin, and... Okay, we'll talk about the note listing later, but needless to say, the most important thing to know about this is that this is the original bottle from 1980, if you will. This one, and you can see there is a difference in my bottle. This one actually has kind of like a white batch code there. This one, I don't know if it rubbed off or if they started to do it a little bit differently. Well, there's a 10 down there, so maybe there is still a white batch code. But this is the original bottle, okay? They have re-released it in 2016. Francois Demachy reformulated it. I have not smelled that new 2016 version, so don't ask me if that one's good, because I don't know. I will tell you that my brother, Rich Mitch, across the pond, who I trust and our noses are usually fairly compatible on some things, but mostly compatible on vintage. And he says the new one is shite, it's not worth getting, it's not well balanced, and all that good stuff. So, from what he says, try to find a vintage if possible. There are bottles floating around, although 100 mils on eBay is like $600 for this stuff, which is nuts. There are some 50 mils between 250 and 400 or so, which that's what these are. These are 50 mil bottles. So one of my favorite fragrances of all time. I mean, honestly, there's no getting around that. I really, really wish Jean Martel made more fragrances for men, because I mean, just these two speak to his prowess, his technicality, his ability to make a very, very special masculine fragrance. It's a shame he only made a handful. But for me, when I wear this, and again, it's 2024, I wore this last 2 days as my scent of the day, back to back, and you can see I put a pretty damn good dent in my bottle. And luckily, thank God, I have a backup, which we'll talk a little bit about. But this fragrance really almost feels like a bespoke fragrance for Ramsey the Ram. It feels like they made this for me. And they made it 5 years before I was created. And, this to me serves as like an announcement. It serves as like a trumpet announcing, like a king coming down the aisle. Because the next year, this came out in 1981, excuse me. This came out in sorry, let me try again. Let's try to find some words, Ramsey. This came out in 1980. In 1981 came what I would consider the greatest year in fragrance history. So this is almost like a trumpet announcing something amazing coming. The fragrance is very special to me for many reasons, but the connection to my father's signature scent and the perfumer is a big addition. Okay, I love the fragrance no matter, even if I didn't know that piece, but that extra piece, his very bright-lived but very short career. By the way, Jean Martel also made a fragrance called Dimitri Revolution. If anyone knows anything about that fragrance, I would love to smell that, just because I'm such a big fan of Jean Martel's work, if you will. But I have no clue what Dimitri Revolution smells like or when it even came out. There's no year on it or anything like that. But so Dior Jules in a nutshell is basically this very verdant green leather that goes through an opening very quickly. The opening quickly transitions to what will be a very long and drawn out dry down. It's very aromatic, but don't think of the big powerhouse masculine fragrances that came after this. This precedes that. This is a much more elegant wear. Okay, so you'll hear some people say, "Oh, this is the most animalic fragrance of all time." No, it's not. There are animalic touches, and we'll talk about it. But even though this is 1 year away from things like Antaeus and Koros and all that stuff, it's not that. Okay, this is, like I said, this is a trumpet announcing the coming of those. It's done in the 1980s style, but it doesn't have that big powerhouse. I wouldn't put this with the powerhouse fragrances, if that makes sense. But that verdant green opening that transitions into that beautiful long dry down, perfect for the office. Absolutely perfect for the office for me. And what's so interesting is that opening explosion reminds me of the way that the green opening in Memoir Man is. And I've got a review of Memoir, and you can see my juice level's like right there. I've worn the piss out of this. I've got a review of Memoir Man on the channel. You can go check it out. But the way Memoir Man has almost that weird, trippy LSD. I almost described it as like going through this existential journey in a Dr. Seuss forest with the weird trees in the Dr. Seuss land, being high on LSD or shrooms or something, and just going through this trippy experience. And if you can just imagine that opening almost being implanted onto a vintage style creation. If you've never smelled Jules, imagine the opening of Memoir Man, but the woods and the leather and the mosses and all that stuff, the oak moss in the base, emanating from the 1980s, okay? But that medicinal green feel of Jules, to me, smells very niche in nature. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if Amouage's Memoir Man drew from Jules for inspiration. I would be very, very curious, because the way, well, we'll talk a little bit more about it, but the way the green notes and that Artemisia kind of feel, the way that they're blended, feel like there's some similarities. But what's crazy about Jules and what I've learned about it through many, many, many wearings over the last 4 years or however long I've had this bottle. I think I've had it around since the pandemic or so. Um, but what I've learned is that the fragrance is so certain of itself. It's so certain of the path that it takes. Every single time I wear it, this fragrance is spot on. I mean, the deviation is almost nil. And what's crazy, and I mentioned with Memoir Man that it's almost like going through this slightly hallucinogenic phase, right? While viewing like a forest driving by. And it's almost like you're riding in the car as the trees are flying by, but you're looking at it through this distorted view because all you see is this window. And so as the trees go by, they come into view, but they very quickly leave. And there's this distortion because of the speed from the car. But the fragrance is traveling down the same path on the same road every time you wear it, like a train being stuck to a track, you know? It's just etched into stone. And the way that the fragrance is just so certain of itself and the way that it wears with such confidence is amazing to me. And the consistency. So words like consistency, stability come to mind over and over again. Every time I wear this, those are the words that come along for the ride with me, literally and figuratively, with Jules. And every time I wear it, no matter the weather conditions, okay, no matter the season, it wears exactly the same on me. Exactly the same, which is damn impressive if I must say so myself. It has this steadiness to it, you know, this dedication to its craft. And I think that really shows in Jean Martel's work, in both Paco Rabanne Pour Homme and Jules. But the way Jean Martel displays this steadiness, dedication to his craft is beautiful to me. It really is beautiful. And if you go back to my opening statement that this is a green leather, okay? That's kind of an easy description of Jules. It's a green leather, right? But some folks, I think, mistake the way that the fragrance rolls into your field of vision, rolls out before your eyes. Again, like driving over the same road over and over again, where your brain turns off the beauty that's kind of around you. If you've driven on the same road, even if you see all these beautiful buildings or beautiful trees or mountains, your brain eventually turns that off if you drive the same road over and over again, right? And I think some folks mistake just the ease, the way this fragrance cuts through that forest, the leather which comes later on, the flowers, the woods, the oak moss, all that stuff. They, I think, just mistake it for simplicity is kind of what I've learned. And some people have called this slightly boring. I could not disagree more, you know. And I think that the beauty in Jules actually lies in its simplicity. But also, very rarely have I come across a fragrance that just almost militaristically delivers its message to me in this perfectly packaged format. And you have to remember, this bottle, I don't know the exact age of the bottle, but I'm guessing it's 40 years old. You know, it's older than me potentially. And for a bottle 40 years old, the way that it's just so the top notes, the green top notes, the dry down, everything is just every single time the same. And that's really something to admire. So the opening, what's interesting about Jules on me is that the opening, the hit of green notes that you get really only lasts about 3 to 5 minutes, okay? 3 to 5 minutes is really where you're going to get the big blast of the opening. And the transition settles the fragrance down basically into the dry down for most of the rest of the life of the fragrance. Deep into the dry down, it changes a little bit. And so you could argue that this fragrance basically reaches its dry down in like about 5 minutes time, okay? And that is the largest transition as far as I'm concerned. There's one big transition. You get your 5 minutes of that opening, which this is about an hour old or so. So I'm not going to do a fresh spray because it'll kind of overtake everything, but oh, it's so beautiful. And, but the largest transition is that first 5 minutes or so, and then it really starts going into the deep, starts the clock on the dry down, if you will. So the way that the green opening starts on my skin and lasts for the first 5 minutes or so, if I can try to describe to you this initial birthing of the green notes on my skin, one of the hardest parts of doing this review, and one of the reasons why I think this review has taken so long. And I've had Jules in my collection since about the pandemic or so, so I think it's been about 4 years now. And luckily, Natalia, wherever you are from Poland, found me a second bottle with the box. God bless her. So wherever you are, we miss you. If you go back to my old videos, you'll see Natalia commenting on some of those videos. So I hope you are well and happy wherever you are, Natalia. She basically found me another bottle. Before she stopped commenting, and hopefully she loved mountain climbing and stuff like that. But she actually sent it from Poland to my brother Rich Mitch in England, and then eventually, after finding somebody to very kindly mule it across, I was able to get a backup bottle at an almost steal of a price. And I tested it. It's legit. Everything's real about it and awesome. And there's no monkey business or funny games going on. She was the real deal. So Natalia, thank you for all you did for the channel. But she basically found me a backup bottle. So I feel much more comfortable wearing this now. I know the whole point of perfume is to be worn, but when you only have 50 mils and it's one of your favorite fragrances of all time, it's kind of hard to do. So it's a lot easier to wear now that I know there's a backup. But I say all that to say, describing the green note has literally eluded me. I mean, it's one of the reasons why I've waited on this review, almost to the point where I just almost want to tell everyone that I don't have the vocabulary to describe what the green opening really smells like to me. Basically, if I gave it my best shot, I would say it's viney, it's medicinal in a green medicinal type way. Obviously, it's green, but when you say things like it's a green leather, people instantly start kind of trying to imagine green leathers. The one that came to mind from the 80s that is the exact opposite of Jules. So when people think green, this is the problem with categorizing things, is you say green leather from the 80s, instantly somebody could think about something like Boss Spirit. Well, Boss Spirit could not be further from Jules. They're both green leather, but this is over here and, this is over there. It's almost like this was created on one side of the world, this was created on the other, or this was created in one forest, this was created in another forest. And there is a review of Boss Spirit. I did it off of a mini that somebody very kindly sent me, or maybe I bought, I can't remember. But I love the fragrance enough that I had to, go out and get a bottle. But Boss Spirit is the exact opposite, because the green notes in Boss Spirit are so sharp and piercing, would be how I would describe the green notes in Boss Spirit. Here, the green notes are almost like creamy in a sense. It's almost like being dipped in cream. Like if you took a bottle of half and half out of your fridge, brought it with you into your Dr. Seuss exploration into the forest, and you were going to go find your favorite green plants, vines and herbs and leaves and all this stuff, and dip them in half and half, because again, you're stoned on LSD going through this insane Dr. Seuss forest, right? That strange green creamy feel is what so eludes my ability to describe this, because it's green and creamy, but in a way it also feels very natural. But in another way, it's like a natural plant that grew on another planet. There is 100% natural, but it doesn't grow on Earth. There's like this weirdness to it that I have a very hard time describing. And it's almost like, imagine looking up at the stars and seeing constellations and star alignments that you don't see from Earth, like you're sitting on another planet and the stars are different. And it would be weird, right? If you saw like constellations that weren't of being on Earth. And there's actually an ancient star known as Wormwood. And Wormwood is actually another name for Artemisia. And there's an Artemisia note in the top of this. But I think the word wormwood actually more properly describes the way that the green smells in my mind, if that makes sense. Wormwood is a better name, I think. It describes that very elusive opening much better for me. And it's almost, turning to the point of smelling absinthe. Not smelling absinthe, but almost turning to the point of smelling absinthe. It just stops short of kind of crossing that line. And there's something slightly dusty to the fragrance. Earthy and dusty, like maybe this forest hasn't seen a lot of rain and yet still everything is green. There's this weird contrast, if that makes sense. I think the dustiness may come from the cumin as well. I don't know. I'm not 100% sure. But that's kind of my best shot. That's the best I'm going to do at trying to describe the first 5 minutes of Jules. So as the fragrance dries down, you're going to start to notice more and more things. But it may take you a few wears to really pick them up. Oh, it's so beautiful. And so immediately, or maybe after a couple wears, you're going to notice that there are these woody elements, of course, that kind of play peekaboo and come in and out, and bitter elements. So they're woody and bitter mixed with that green kind of creaminess, if you will. Weird cream spinach type thing. So woody and bitter elements in the perfume, and almost like you're traveling through your imaginary forest, you encounter this tree that you break apart because, again, you're completely stoned on LSD and you have Superman powers. So you break this tree apart, expecting there to be something like oud inside or something like that, only to discover the tree is like rotted out from the inside and it's filled with termites or other bugs or whatever it is. But the wood has this slight feel of being ancient, even though it's old and desiccated. It has this ancient and this when you split it apart, you know, the splinters go everywhere and you go in the dirt trying to dig them up, and in the dirt, you know, you get that dustiness again from the dirt. And there is this touch of cumin, and that's where the cumin, I think, adds spiciness and dustiness to the fragrance. The cumin in here doesn't give off this sweaty undertone that you get in Fate Man, which I will review one of these days very soon, I promise. But the cumin adds, to me, a bit of danger to the fragrance. Like the fragrance would be worn by the type of man that like a young girl would just want to run away with. You know, there's this bit of danger and intrigue to the fragrance. It's professional, but you know, underneath there's a little bit of being turned up a little bit, you know. The cumin adds a touch of this risky excitement, I guess is what I was trying to say. And later on, so the cumin kind of does that in the top. In the dry down, I'm convinced there's some castoreum in here. There is no castoreum listed in the note listing, but I am 100% convinced that there is some sort of castoreum used. But the castoreum is very elegantly dosed. Okay, so again, this is not 1981. We'll get there. This is pre-1981. And then you get the lavender. And the lavender adds this dressed up professionalism, this buttoned up, you know, feeling. Very traditional feel to the fragrance. A masculine twist, if there ever was one, with the lavender. So that dirt will make an appearance later on, but it changes to dirty because, as I said, the leather accord starts to creep through more and more as time goes on. And it blends with this castoreum note, which I'm convinced is there, which adds this warmth to the fragrance. It feels slightly metallic, slightly warm, but the castoreum is very elegantly dosed. That's something to keep in mind. So when people tell you this is the most animalic and challenging fragrance, no. There are little animalic touches, but remember, it foreshadows 1981. It's not 1981, it's 1980. And so we're not there yet. You don't get the big dose of castoreum or civet or hyrax or anything like that, which comes later on in the 80s. Although, if you wanted to make a bespoke fragrance for me personally, if you took this DNA and turned that castoreum note way up, I think you would just about have a perfect 10. I don't rate fragrances on the channel. This may be a perfect 10 as it is, because it's exactly what it's supposed to be. But for me, turning that castoreum note up even more, turning the leathery notes up even more, would just make the perfect version. Call it Dior Jules Extreme or Extreme or whatever the hell you want it to be. But the leather in here feels very brown, you know, and worn. Very late 70s, early 80s leather and color schemes come to mind. Just look at the box again. Let me just show you the box. Look, for some reason, when I see all these colors, I see brown. There's black, there's red, there's yellow. There's actually no brown, but my brain almost interprets this little color scheme as brown. Like if you just kind of ran them all together, right? Just blended all of these colors right here together, you would get the brown that I'm trying to describe to you in my brain that I'm seeing. It would create this brown that just sits in my mind. And so just think old vintage brown leather, blending all of these colors together. And but one thing that I always get, and it comes to mind, and I don't know why, is leather made in America, not made in China and then shipped to America. The leather in Jules feels to me like an American made it, you know, and this is coming from an American, so I know that makes zero sense to anybody else. Um, but especially since this fragrance is made in France, clearly in France. Where does it say? Well, it probably says it somewhere. But yes, here it is, made in France. So obviously it's made in France. But you know, there is just somehow the leather feels like it's made in America. I know it doesn't make any sense, but it almost has this homemade feel to it. Maybe that's why. But it reminds me of a time when America used to make things, when we had a manufacturing base before it was carved out and gutted and shipped overseas. So just imagine a couch where the wood legs were like carved in America, and the full grain leather was pulled across the sofa and stitched down and all that stuff by hand in America, or machine or whatever. But it just has that, you know, feel for some reason. Um, and the leather feels to me, and it comes early and stays with you. Okay, so the leather hits you pretty early on. Once that first 5 minutes of that creamy green verdant feel kind of blend away, the leather really starts to stick with you. But later on into the dry down, it almost turns slightly suede in nature. Like you get this very silky and velvety feel to the fragrance. And I think when you add the flowers into the equation, you realize just what a beautiful fragrance this is. Jean Martel, such an amazing perfumer when it came to using green notes. And I'll review Paco Rabanne Pour Homme one of these days as well. But there are just beautiful outdoorsy green notes in both of these creations for men. Um, and the way he blended the green notes with the woody notes and the leather and then the suede later on is something that, like I said, I could wear for the rest of my life and never get tired of what Jules is. But one more element to the fragrance that must be discussed, and that is the floral element. So I think this is kind of the background music to this whole symphony that Jean Martel created. But the flowers must be discussed. So he's used things like cyclamen, which basically has this very tender floral, but also spicy green type tint to it, if you will, with a bit of powderiness. There's this slight powdery touch to it, and I think that comes from the florals. I'm not 100% sure. Maybe there's like a powdery muskiness to it. You know, back in the day, whenever something was animalic in the 70s and stuff like that, I've had some old timers tell me we didn't call it castoreum or civet or hyrax. We just called it musk. It was just a musky smell. This has a little bit of that powdery muskiness that starts to come through. Could be bits and pieces of the florals. The rose feels slightly powdery here. The cyclamen feels slightly powdery here. But it also could be this powdery general. Think about like a 70s muskiness starting to come through. 70s, 80s muskiness. That does come through as well. And then you get the carnation. The carnation is green, of course. Carnation adds a beautiful spiced green type feel to it. And just imagine like putting leaves and stems and all that stuff into a blender and blending it up. And you get a little bit of that slight artichoke-like feel from the carnation. Jasmine adds a fresh piercingness, and the rose, of course, is rose. But the rose is slightly powdery here, but I like it. I really like the powdery aspects that come through. Now, if you notice how I described Jules, breaking it down like that, is this a simple fragrance? The biggest knock I've heard on Jules, some people have called it a very simple, there's nothing special about it, just people thinking back in time and nostalgia distorting their view and all that stuff. Bullshit. I mean, to me, how can a fragrance that's so simple carry so much weight and depth and spark so many trains of thought? And I am just like so intrigued by Jules. When I wear it, it grabs my attention. Every moment I'm wearing it, all of my senses are turned to the max. You know, my concentration is focusing on every little detail. And the consistency of the fragrance and the way it wears, being on that track, being on the road, gets me every time. Every single time I spray Dior Jules, my response is literally, oh my fucking God. I mean, it is just the smell of the garden that Adam and Eve were in, and just consider me tempted. I mean, it is just, I have no defense mechanism against Jules. It's fresh and natural smelling, but also mysterious and slightly dangerous, as I said earlier. but it's also professional and buttoned up. And it has manners, basically, is the way I would describe it. And if you've seen the poster for Jules, the man wearing sort of the black jacket with Jules written on it, and like I said, I think technically Jules means youthful in French, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe some of my French speakers can correct me there, but I think it means useful. But then later on, it became a slang, like playboy or player or pimp or something like that, like they said earlier. But this is more of a fragrance for a professional setting for me, not so much going out to the bar. I mean, I would still wear this to go out to a club or a bar in 2024 and not give a fuck, because that's what this fragrance was made for. I think the man that just doesn't give a fuck. And I respect that. But in 2024, I think it's better suited for the office because it gives you that buttoned up professionalism. But I think it's much more powerful as like a statement maker fragrance, a statement maker that shows your maturity as a man and living life of a grown man, not of a child, not as a man child. Like this last weekend, I went to the stockyards in Fort Worth for the first time in God knows how long at night. And I kept smelling when these guys would walk by me, these men would walk by me, this sweet smell of sweet amber woods, those two main things. And even though they looked like men, they smelled like boys. They smelled childish and immature and undeveloped is the word that would come to mind for me. So to me, when I think about something like Jules, I think about a man who reeks of power and knowledge, of a life lived to the fullest, having the mental fortitude to want to hunt down something like this, to research and hunt down such a beautiful discontinued gem, basically, because this version is discontinued. And if we're going off of my brother Rich Mitch's nose, he says the new one is not worth getting. I haven't smelled it, but I trust him on that. So even though it's not discontinued, I'm going to say the knowledge and mental fortitude to hunt down something like this and then go out and achieve it, work and save up your money and go out and get it, even if it's a little bit expensive. If you're going to go to a club and spend $1,000 on bottle service, you can spend $300 on a bottle of fragrance that'll last you God knows how long. But also, I would say the intestinal fortitude of being able to wear and carry a fragrance like this in 2024 and not reek of Sauvage or Bleu de Chanel or any of those blue fragrances or the disgustingly sweet amberwood trend, right? You're basically wearing something that reeks of power and knowledge and professionalism to me when I think of Jules. Even though it means pimp or player, whatever you want to call it, playboy, this is more a man who has lived a life and is knows how to carry himself, knows how to hold himself, knows the manners, knows the game, but underneath there's a little bit of that danger. There's the spark of that danger. And the fragrance itself is just divine. I mean, so happy to have 2 bottles of this, and so happy to finally be able to do this review, because this fragrance deserves all of the love and attention and then some. And as far as oak moss goes, absolutely. You get that textured oak moss green dry down. There's multiple green notes actually I didn't mention. There's tarragon in the top. There's basil on the heart. There's oak moss in the base. So, and I mentioned some of the flowers also having green touches like the carnation and the cyclamen, stuff like that. And there's cedar and sandalwood in here. And then there's also a slight, later into the dry down, I mentioned the suede a little bit, but there's also a little bit of this ambery twist to the fragrance. So yes, it's leathery. My nose focuses on the leather because I love leather, but also this is a really late dry down. I could easily see amber coming through a little bit. So I think most people save this for winter, but I wore this in June. It's June 24th today of 2024, and this wore beautifully. No problems at all, even in the Texas heat. Like I said, it is militaristic in the way that it wears on me. It is so perfect every single time. And most fragrances change. They're a little different in this weather or that, or if it rains, or every time I've tested this, it is straight as an arrow. So anyways, that is my Vintage Hall of Fame review on Christian Dior Jules. If you have any history with this, please do leave a comment. I would love to hear your thoughts on what I would consider one of the greatest fragrances of all time. I know these individual reviews don't get the clicks and views of the list. I don't give a shit. This type of thing, this type of fragrance especially, deserves to be heralded and discussed. And you know, if even if one person is inspired, I'm not going to say that I'm an influencer or anything like that, but if I inspire one person to try this, it's worth it to me. So anyways, that's my thoughts. As always, it's a pleasure. Thanks for watching. Cheers, guys, and I'll catch you next time. Bye bye.